There's an interesting question when it comes to art in the theater. And I always found it really interesting when I was working in the theater. And that is there a function for the theater? And there are many playwrights. Well, there's actually quite a debate about this among theater people. And some people think that that theater really should serve a function, that it shouldn't just be a place of entertainment, but it should be a place that stimulates you to think about things beyond the scope of sort of everyday life. It shouldn't be just a place that you come in and forget about the cares of the day and have a few laughs and forget about things. But it should be a place where you come in and it's very thought-provoking and you start to question the society that you live in.
In our fifth category, we're going to talk about modern art. Modern art can be just about anything, from shapes to random outfits. Really, modern artists get very creative. These are just a few faces of what modern art can look like. Paul Zane, an impressionist from the early days of the movement in the 1870s, used a word which showed he had an idea of his own place in an art historical process. The word was primitive. I shall always, he said, be primitive of the path I discovered. Zane's hypothesis, a plausible one, was that an analogous process took place in the 19th and 20th centuries in the course of a massive swing away from what was left of Renaissance tradition. Amy Balkin, a modern artist, actually bought a piece of land to give to the public. Many consider this art.
Questions about what I do and whether or not it is art. And so for me, actually, that's where art becomes interesting. It's in a place where art leaves what's recognized as art and takes on new kinds of areas where art hasn't gone before. Or I wouldn't say that, well, this is a problem because it's a question of whether or not it's possible to make something new. So I wouldn't argue that the work I'm making is something new, but I would say that what it's trying to do is work in what's called an expanded field. And the expanded field means moving outside of the genres. And I'm talking about visual art that are traditionally recognized as visual art, such as painting or drawing or sculpture, or more recently, performance or multimedia or video games.
Why don't we move on to our next category, architecture? Frank Lloyd Wright made all of these buildings. He was considered an architectural genius to most people. By 1925, Wright was recognized as America's greatest living architect. Later in life, he dropped the living and just made it the greatest. Buildings are part of our everyday life. It is very easy to just walk past them without thinking too much about why they are there and who designed them.
I think he was an artist. I think if you look at the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, there is no way that you can look at that and not be impressed by the artfulness of it. When you stand outside of it, you don't really know if it's a museum, a school. You really don't know what's happening inside. But the image of the museum from the outside is a form that even today isn't very common. It's very striking. It's very, very beautiful, aesthetically pleasing. It makes you think, and you really have no idea. Maybe you do going there, but from the outside you have no idea that it's a museum. What you know is that it really is a beautiful piece of sculpture. Then you find out when you go inside there happens to be a lot of artwork, and it's a museum in a really great space as well. So I think he really had an artistic sense.
We have come to our last category, sculpture. Many sculptors are inspired by nature. There are no right or wrong answers. Art can mean different things to different people. Artists get really creative when it comes to making sculptures. Some use metal, while others use ice. And even some artists use sand to create sculptures. We all know the bean in Millennium Park. I hope so. Even this larger-than-life sculpture has been debated over being art. The bean isn't the only Chicago sculpture being debated over art. Calder's Flamingo is another sculpture, as well as Picasso's Unnamed Picasso. It is said that Picasso could draw extraordinarily well as a young boy, but actually earned his fame through the abstract work that he did. Oh my god, the video's over. The end. I could never forget you guys. I give you big hugs. This video was narrated by me, Daisy. Yeah. There's definitely a borderline between where does something start being art and where does something stop being art? Where does something start being art and where does something stop being art? So you're like, whoa, is this art? And then is this art? So you're like, whoa, are you art? Is he art? Are we art? Is this art?